As the cleanup batter in this impressive program, I'm very pleased to introduce another old friend, well known again to this community, not least because of his time working for Goldman Sachs. Subsequently, he has played a major role at the national political level, notably as the chairman of Breitbart, and subsequently as the chairman of the Trump 2016 campaign, and subsequent to that, as the strategic advisor to President Trump in the White House. He needs no further introduction other than to say a great welcome to Steve Bannon.
Thank you, Frank. One of the first things I want to do is get our nomenclature, our vernacular, correct. The most important audience we have here today is not the illustrious folks from Wall Street, our financial community, the national security folks that have joined us. It's not the people at CNBC and Yahoo Finance, all the great TV networks and channels we have here today that lead the world, Bloomberg, in providing information. We have today Miles Kwok and Grow Media. And Grow Media is beaming this in right now to China. The most important audience we have is the Chinese people. The Committee on the Present Danger, everything we're talking about today, is not about the Chinese people. It is to help free the Chinese people. The enemy is very clear. It's the enemy of the Chinese people. That is a radical cadre of the CCP. A radical cadre that has taken China down a very dangerous path. These two systems, the system, and Brother Goldman talked about it, or Gordon talked about the Westphalian system. These two systems are not mutually compatible. They can't both survive. We have a global house divided, half slave and half free. The slaves are the honorable, terrific, hardworking people of China. Old 100 names, the backbone of Chinese society. They have been enslaved by a radical cadre led by President Xi and Wan Xishan and others of that cadre. Financed 100% by Western capitalism, financed by this city and the city of London and Frankfurt, and provided as technology appropriated by Western companies. The most shocking thing today, and I'm going to keep this short because I want Q&A to have people like Roger Robinson and Kyle Bass, Dan David, Gordon Chang, Brother Goldman, and others to be able to answer your questions. The most shocking thing today, even when we drill down on all the different aspects of this, the most shocking thing today is that this happened in April of 2019. History is going to judge us. We are going to be weighed and measured by what happened. The same scam's been being run. Same scam's being run. Brother Robinson knows this. Frank Gaffney knows this. Committee on the Present Danger, why was it set up? Because it kind of took our eye off the ball with the great threat we had in the 60s and the 70s, and that was the Soviet Union. Remember what we were told then. We were told then they're the rising power, we're the declining power. Right? We have to have rapprochement, we have to have accommodation, we have to have détente. Their system's better, their system's more organized, their system's going to win. It took patriots of Team B and the Committee on the Present Danger, of Democrats and Republicans, it wasn't about party affiliation, to come forward and say, and there's people like Andy Marshall, who just passed away, one of the great Americans of the 20th and 21st century, and one of the reasons I got the inspiration to sit down with Frank Gaffney and talk about reforming the Committee on the Present Danger. Because what Bill Casey and Andy Marshall said back in the 70s is, hey, let's look at the math. And guess what? The CIA and other people were wrong. Their economy was only half the size we thought. They weren't the rising power. We weren't the declining power. We had convinced ourselves. And guess who had part of that convincing? Henry Kissinger. Was it Alison Graham? The Thucydides trap crowd. It's the exact same scam. China is not the rising power. We're not the declining power. Brother Goldman, one of the first people I had come see me in the White House, gave that exact talk and brought in a couple of brilliant people with him. It's the Westphalian system that works. It's freedom that works. What better example do you need than Hong Kong and Taiwan and what the Chinese Americans have done in the United States of America? You give them freedom. You give them freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of religion. They can accomplish anything. But if you finance a gulag, you're going to get a gulag on a global scale. And trust me, the radical cadre, the CCP, that is their plan. What's most disgusting is that all of this is known. It takes brave people like Roger Robinson and Kyle Bass and others to bring it up. You don't think this math is not known by people in the city of London? You think this math is not known by people on Wall Street? In the third week of January of 2017, there were two speeches given. One in Davos and one in front of the Capitol of the United States. The first one was President Xi, went to Davos. He was hailed as a conquering hero, the guy that was going to save globalism. Gave a speech, covered the Economist, covered the Financial Times, right? This was the hero. He talked about all the problems that come about this populist movement, these nationalists, right? All the hate and all the discontent coming from them. And he was lauded by the biggest consulting firms, the biggest investment banks, the biggest hedge funds that went to all the best schools. Do you think for a second that these people do not fully understand what's going on? Of course they do. But they have a higher calling, and that's money. History is going to weigh and measure us. And you have a decision. Are you going to be on the right side of history? In that same week, Donald Trump gave a speech, the American Carnage speech, which I'm very proud to have had a slight assistance to then candidate Trump in writing. The key part was not American Carnage. It was the litany of what he had talked about American decline. And finished on the line, now comes the hour of action. It is Donald Trump that has completely reversed the field and now has engaged China, really, in what I think is not a trade deal, the beginning of an armistice, because it's a war. This is the great Bible, unrestricted warfare. Unrestricted warfare. This is the book, the great book written by the two Chinese colonels in the PLA in the late 90s, which we base all of this on. This is the most significant book of strategy since Clausewitz. And this lays out in very excruciating detail in 1999 of exactly how they're going to take down the hegemon of the industrial democracies of the West. And it's like Roger said. It's no more 5 or 6 domains. It's very simple. You have information and cyber warfare, you have economic warfare, and you have kinetic warfare. And the last thing we want to do is get tangled up with the West in kinetic warfare. Because the one thing they have shown is they know how to fight. Okay? Eventually we'll get there, but we can take them down through information that is both media, influence, and cyber, and economic warfare. And they have been engaged in economic warfare, direct economic warfare with the West for 20 years. It is President Trump that has now reinforced our ability to combat that, with the attitude that we're not the declining power. I agree with Gordon and others. I think, and I was one of the original team that got the trade, contextualized the trade, to set the framework for it. I agree with Gordon. I think we ought to walk away from this right now. We ought to start playing hardball. We ought to start playing smash mouth. The reason is this radical cadre only understands one thing. Ask the Chinese people. Why do you think Guo Media today has to try to pierce the firewall? A firewall we should understand that's built not just by American and Western technology, but also by Western and American companies. Why does that have to happen? They don't want this information out there. In fact, as soon as it becomes a Bridge and Road Initiative is now, well, it used to be One Belt, One Road. As soon as the West starts to expose that, they want to change the term. Made in China 2025 is not to be talked about. I don't think it's had a mention in the Chinese media in 9 months. Right? They're trying to pull back from any relationship at all with Huawei with the PLA. Huawei is the PLA. And if the senior executives of Huawei don't like me saying that, then bring it. I would love to have Discovery in this one. You are the People's Liberation Army. Here's the dilemma. The dilemma is the burden is upon us. Not just the average citizens, it's our system. If we acted as fiduciaries, the underpinning of the entire financial system, why are our capital markets so robust? It's about our fiduciary responsibility. Here is why here's why the deplorables are so angry. Here's why they elected Donald Trump. They understand the factories got shipped to China. They understand the jobs went. And as J.D. Vance shows in Hillbilly Elegies, the opioids, that's what the opioid crisis is. Tariffs are not about a tax. Tariffs are about self-esteem and dignity. It's about bringing manufacturing jobs back. But more importantly, as you peel it back, the deplorables' pension funds financed it. This is a Greek tragedy. The greatest power on earth, the working people that are the backbone of it, that hold our civic society together, that coach Little League, that build the churches, that serve in these desolate battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan. I was a junior officer when I was on a destroyer in the South China Sea. A South China Sea then that we were hunting for carrier battle groups to protect and hunting for Soviet submarines. Never ever envisioning that an American government would look the other way when stationary aircraft carriers essentially were built to take away the freedom of navigation and the lifeline to our allies in Taiwan and South Korea and Japan. I want to wrap with one thing. Joe Biden, opened his presidential campaign today. America's an idea. America's not an idea. America's a country. America's a country with a border and a people and a land and very empowering ideas it got from the Judeo-Christian West that have been passed down from millennia. So they got the 20 candidates. Joe's going to go across. New York Post provides us today, the 20 candidates, right? What their poll numbers are, what they're running on. And Joe's going to add to this. And they talk about what they stand for. And I happened to watch, I don't know if you did, I watched all 5 hours the other night of the CNN town halls. You know what's almost never mentioned? China. This is the greatest existential threat we've ever had. This makes the Soviet Union's economy, Russia's economy today is the size of New York State. When Andy Marshall and Bill Casey did the analysis for Ronald Reagan, it was the size of California. That changed the entire dynamic of the Cold War. That was the Reagan Defense Bill. We were never going to build a 600-ship Navy. I was the special assistant to the chief of naval operation. It was economic warfare to bury them, as was Star Wars. That's what Roger Robinson did. He's one of the unknown heroes and not well enough known. He worked on that. That's how we destroyed the Soviet Union. And by the way, CIA still got it wrong. Said take 50 years. Took 8. Why? Because what did Reagan say? We win and they lose. And that's what the Committee on President Danger is. In all of this, and I'm going to wrap up shortly, they go through what everybody stands for. And I quote from the New York Post. Somebody's running on mindfulness. And that is not Marianne Williamson. She's running on at least bringing positivity. I might note to the New York Post, by the way, you've swapped the picture. This is actually Swalwell, that's Tim Ryan. Your campaign's going poorly when the New York Post gets your pictures wrong. But it's really about Joe. It's not about this group. It's Joe Biden. Joe Biden is going to be in Pennsylvania today because Joe Biden is much more woke than Hillary Clinton about what it's going to take to defeat Donald Trump. He's got to go out to, because Joe's going to start with all the union support. So Joe's got to go out to Western Pennsylvania, understanding Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota, that upper fortress of the Trump movement, which delivered this stunning victory in 2016, Biden's got to show he can bring that. What he ought to do today is be very truthful to the labor unions up there and to the steel workers. Joe Biden's got to come 100% clean on his relationship and his family's relationship with the CCP. In 2013, on Air Force Two, I think he took his son over there. 10 days later, they signed a $1 billion deal for their private hedge fund. We need to know every piece of involvement that Joe Biden has had with the Chinese Communist Party, the Bank of China, and all the financial institutions in China. And Joe Biden has to tell those steel workers it was Donald Trump that brought in the 232s, that put the tariffs on steel and aluminum, start to bring the jobs back. Remember, Trump was mocked and ridiculed about when he did the 232 and he did the 301 on technology. He was mocked and ridiculed. This could not happen. It couldn't happen at all. Joe Biden was there for 8 years. We had the Munich of the 21st century, was allowing the CCP to build those islands. And what Obama did, he moved one Marine brigade to Darwin, Australia. That's the pivot to Asia. Oh, except having President Xi come in the Rose Garden, look him in the eye, and on world TV shake his hand and said, no more cyber attacks, no more cyber theft, and doubled down in the next year. Joe Biden has to answer the question. What did you know? When did you know it? And how much money has your family and you personally taken from the most murderous regime of the 21st century? Thank you very much.